She powdered her hair with ground bone and chalk, laced it with lavender oil, and set it high enough to brush the lintels of palace doors. Beneath the elegant curls lay a secret, one she would never dare speak aloud. For in the courts of Europe, the absence of hair could mean the absence of virtue, and the smooth shine of a bare scalp could whisper of disease, scandal, or sin. Imagine walking through Paris in the year 1685. The cobblestones glisten with rain. The air is heavy with the mingled scents of damp stone, horse manure, and sweet orange blossom. Through the crowd glide men in silken coats and women in gowns that rustle like paper. But your eyes are drawn upward. Towers of pale, powdered hair sway above them like clouds drifting over a battlefield. These wigs are not mere fashion. They are armor. They are lies woven from horsehair and human locks, sprayed with powder to hide the rot beneath. What could drive a continent to hide beneath these perfume fortresses? The answer lies in a disease whispered about behind closed doors, one whose first symptoms were invisible, but whose final stages could strip away not only flesh, but dignity. The name was rarely spoken aloud. The fear of it was everywhere. Syphilis arrived in Europe at the turn of the 16th century like a shadow falling across the sun. It began with a rash, a few sores, nothing to stop a courtier from attending a ball. But as months passed, it hollowed the body from within. Faces collapsed, bones twisted, skin split and wept in the night. Worst of all, for the world's most image-conscious elite, hair fell away in uneven patches, exposing the scalp like a battlefield after fire. In a society where hair was not just an ornament, but a proclamation, a public banner of health, wealth, and divine favor, baldness was no small loss. It was a stigma, a mark of weakness, and worse, a clue. Courtiers whispered in corridors, noting who had suddenly taken to wearing hats indoors. Women passed judgment with a glance. Rumors could destroy a family faster than a duel. Few would admit the truth. Fewer still would risk public sympathy, for there was none to be had. And so the disguise was born. Wig makers became silent physicians of reputation, replacing what illness had stolen. What began as discreet coverings soon swelled into something else entirely. Monuments of hair, sculpted to command awe and conceal shame in equal measure. It might have remained a quiet, private art, a whisper of vanity, if not for one young monarch who refused to fade into the shadows of his own illness. Louis XIV of France, the self-proclaimed Sun King, understood that his body was more than flesh and bone. It was a living emblem of his rule. Every inch of him had to radiate majesty, and the early thinning of his hair threatened to crack that illusion. He would not let it. Louis summoned the finest perruquiers in Paris, granting them the royal commission to restore his crown, not of gold, but of hair. What they built was more than a wig. It was a work of theater. Curls cascaded like carved marble, framing his face in a halo of pale splendor. It lengthened his silhouette, exaggerated his presence, and caught the candlelight like silk spun from the sun itself. Soon every nobleman at Versailles was scrambling to imitate him. To go bareheaded was no longer simply unfashionable, it was unthinkable. The wig became law, and powdered hair the language of power. Yet beneath the scent of lavender and the gleam of starch-white curls, the truth remained. It had all begun with the desperate need to hide. By the turn of the 18th century, Europe's ruling class was a sea of powdered crowns. In the marble corridors of Versailles, in the candlelit halls of Vienna, even in the drafty parlors of London, wigs were no longer a curiosity, they were an unspoken requirement. A bare head was a confession, and yet their purpose reached far beyond fashion. A finely made peruke could do more than disguise thinning hair. It could conceal the pitted scars of smallpox, the swollen lumps of untreated infections, the discolored patches of skin from mercury cures that poisoned as often as they healed. In an era when medicine was as likely to kill you as save you, a wig was the closest thing to a miracle. a mask that told the world you were untouched by suffering. They also offered a strange, unexpected advantage: freedom from lice. Natural hair was a feast for parasites, but a shaved scalp, hidden beneath a detachable wig, was easier to keep clean. Wigs could be boiled, combed, treated with scented powders, and hung to dry in the sun. For the aristocrat, this ritual was as much about fragrance as hygiene. Clouds of lavender, rose, and bergamot clung to the air around them, a perfumed barrier against the musk of unwashed bodies and damp clothes. The whiteness of a wig was its final statement, a ghostly gleam that spoke of wealth and refinement. Achieving that hue was an art, but not a gentle one. The most common powders were made from rice flour, chalk, or starch, but the truly dazzling whites often came from lead or plaster of Paris. They clung to every curl, catching the flicker of candlelight like frost on glass, and slowly poisoning the skin beneath. Color was not absent from the world of wigs. For women especially, pastel hues became a playground of expression. Lilac for a spring court, pale blue for winter, the blush of rose for summer evenings. Powder also carried scent, carefully infused with crushed herbs or citrus oils. A noblewoman might walk into a room trailing the aroma of violets or orange blossom, masking the stale tang of the hall itself. But the scent was also a deception. Beneath it lay hair, or scalps, that had not felt soap in weeks, sometimes months. Powder absorbed oil, mattifying the surface like fresh snow over churned earth. The court saw only the illusion. The truth was never meant for daylight. Where fashion ruled, escalation was inevitable. The taller and more elaborate the wig, the more status it projected. Curled tiers spiraled upward like cathedral spires. Some brushed the tops of carriage doors, others had to be adjusted to pass through archways. A nobleman's wig could take hours to dress and powder, and it became a public measure of wealth. From this excess, a new phrase emerged: big wig. In its time, it was no metaphor. The largest, most ostentatious wigs belonged to those whose names carried the most weight. It was status made visible, a declaration that here stood someone whose place in society was as unshakable as the curls on his brow. But such grandeur came at a price, and not just in gold. Commoners began to imitate the style. Merchants, lawyers, even blacksmiths began to powder their own modest wigs or hair, walking the streets with an air of borrowed nobility. To the aristocracy, this was theft of the highest order. If everyone looked like a lord, then the visual language of power itself was at risk of collapse. The elite's response was simple: build the wigs higher, make the curls grander, and push the fashion into realms no working man could possibly afford to follow. The battle for visual dominance had begun. By the mid-18th century, the wig was no longer just a covering, it was a stage. In the glittering salons of Paris, women arrived with hairstyles that defied gravity and reason. Jewels winked in the candlelight, lace ribbons swayed with each movement, and the truly daring displayed entire tableaux woven into their hair. One lady famously appeared with a fully rigged miniature ship balanced atop her powdered curls to celebrate a French naval victory. Another arrived with a birdcage and a live songbird nestled in her coiffure. These towering creations required scaffolding of wire and padding, layers of powder and pomade, and hours of labor from skilled hairdressers. They also required endurance. A wig could be worn for days, even weeks, with only careful nightly maintenance. Women slept propped on special pillows to protect the delicate structure. Beneath the grandeur, however, the scalp often festered in the dark, warm, moist, and hidden from air. The perfume, no matter how fine, could only do so much. Such extravagance fed an entire economy. In France alone, nearly 1,000 professional wig makers thrived by the 1770s, their shops bustling with courtiers, merchants, and ambitious commoners desperate to climb the social ladder. The craft was protected by guilds, each guarding their secrets: how to curl horsehair without scorching it, how to blend human hair seamlessly, How to powder without clumping. Prices soared. A single masterpiece wig could cost more than a year's wages for a laborer. Servants carried scented pouches to keep their masters' wigs fresh during long evenings. Special wig cases were built for travel, ensuring that not a single curl was bent out of place. And yet, as the decades wore on, wigs began to lose their magic. When butchers and blacksmiths could stroll through the streets wearing smaller powdered versions, the visual code of aristocracy blurred. The rich responded with even greater excess, but the gap between display and reality was starting to show. The end came not with a change in taste, but with a change in the world. In the final years of the 18th century, France teetered toward revolution. The opulent wigs of the court became symbols of greed and detachment, reminders of a nobility that built its image on the suffering of others. As heads began to roll beneath the guillotine, the towering curls of Versailles rolled with them, cast aside in favor of simpler, more practical styles. By the dawn of the 19th century, powdered wigs had vanished from everyday wear, lingering only in courtrooms and ceremonial halls. Their time as a living fashion had ended, leaving behind portraits of men and women who gazed down from gilt frames, their white clouds of hair frozen forever in oil and canvas. But the story of the wig is more than a curiosity of costume. It is a testament to human resourcefulness and vanity. Born of disease, shaped by royal ambition, and elevated to dizzying heights by competition, the powdered wig was never just a style. It was a shield, a weapon, a lie that became a truth simply because enough people chose to believe in it. Even now, the phrase "big wig" carries its echo. And if you stand in the hushed hall of a museum, staring at a portrait where the subject's hair swirls higher than seems possible, remember, beneath the powder, beneath the perfume, there was once a scalp and a secret.